Hello there. Tonight, as the world begins to quiet down and the stars slowly rise above the edge of sleep, you are invited into a gentle story. A story without rush, without noise, and without worry. This isn't a tale of kings and wars. Not about battles or crowns. It's a quieter kind of history. The soft kind. The kind that happens among trees and fountains. Beneath dappled light and moonlit skies, tonight we are going to walk together, slowly, through the peaceful gardens of Versailles. You don't need to do anything. Just lie back. Let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften, and together, let's step into a world of blooming roses, whispering hedges, and still waters that remember everything. A garden begins with a dream long ago, before Versailles became a name of grandeur, before the Golden Palace shimmered in sunlight. There was only countryside. Imagine it, rolling fields of grass, gentle marshes, tall trees dancing softly in the breeze, and nestled among them, a small, quiet hunting lodge. It was the year, and Louis XIV, the young king who would one day be known as the Sun King, stood at the edge of this land, dreaming of something more. Not just a palace, but a paradise, a place where nature followed rules, where silence could bloom, and where beauty was not found, but made. He did not want the wild. He wanted peace. He wanted order. And most of all, he wanted a garden that never forgot to be graceful. The gardeners of stillness do make this dream real. He called upon a master of gardens, André Landré. Landré was not a loud man. He did not rush. He listened to the land. He measured the sun. He watched how shadows fell. And so, with care and patience, he began. First, the land had to be reshaped. Marshes dried, carved. Fountains imagined before they ever touched stone. It took years. Each day, gardeners arrived before dawn, their breath misting in the cold air. Their hands, calloused and tender, worked soil like it was something sacred. They wore linen and wool. They whispered more than they spoke, and with each small movement, a root placed here, a seed tucked there, the garden began to take its first sleepy breath, walking slowly among wonders. As the years passed, the gardens grew. They did not burst into life. They opened gently. Gravel paths appeared, stretching long and quiet. Rows of trees stood like patient guardians. Marble statues carved from stone peeked out from corners, always watching but never intruding. And those who walked there walked slowly. A stroll through Versailles was not a journey. It was a pause, a moment to feel the crunch of gravel underfoot, to breathe the scent of roses, to listen to the hush of the hedges. Every turn was deliberate. Every view framed like a painting. The garden was not just seen, it was felt. The orangery and the first light there is a place in the garden, hidden below the palace. Where orange trees sleep, they are kept in grand stone halls, the orangery, waiting for spring each morning. The first light slides over the tops of these trees, brushing their glossy leaves with gold. The rows stretch far and wide, each tree in its own neat pot. Some of these trees are hundreds of years old, and yet they remain quiet, gentle. In spring, they are brought out to feel the sun. But in winter, they rest, just like you are resting now. They don't need to speak. Their silence is enough. The hidden groves Versailles is not just one garden. It is many. Hidden among hedges are secret groves, each one different, each one waiting. Some are bright with fountains, others are dark and shaded. Some echo with quiet laughter. Others are made for solitude. There is one, they say, where a lion's head carved from marble pours water forever into a shallow pool. The sound never changes, just the soft splash, again and again. The air there smells of cool stone, wet moss, and green dot. No one speaks there. They only listen. The forgotten corners, some paths in Versailles are nearly lost. They twist gently. Through climbing vines and blooming trellises, roses spill over arches, petals scatter across gravel. These corners are quiet. Too quiet for kings. They belong to wanderers, gardeners, artists, dreamers. It is said that a painter once fell, asleep beneath the roses, brush still in hand. When he awoke, he swore the flowers had moved, just slightly, as if they had watched. Over him, places like this are not made for grandeur. They are made for moments, soft ones. Like now, rest in the shade by midday when the sun rests high and warm. Even the gardeners pause. They sit beneath tall trees, oaks, and chestnuts, eating quietly. A piece of bread, bit of cheese, some fruit in the palm of their hands. They speak little. The garden speaks enough. They know its rhythms, its moods, its breathing. And when they finish their simple meals, they lean back, eyes closed, letting the rustle of leaves and the hum of bees drift them somewhere soft, somewhere. Like where you are going now, the music of the groves, sometimes soft music, fills the garden. A harp, a violin, quiet flute in the distance. It comes not from a stage, but from beneath the trees, where a musician plays for no one, or maybe for the birds. During garden festivals, nobles would walk slowly in pastel gowns, listening, not clapping, just listening. They let the music mix with the scent of lavender and orange blossoms, with the chirp of birds, with the heartbeat of the earth, and then they moved on. No sound lasted too long. Nothing needed to. When the night arrives, says the sun sinks low. The Grand Canal reflects the sky. Still, silver. Unmoving, the swans begin to glide slower. Lanterns flicker on, one by one, along the banks. And then, as darkness settles, the gardens go quiet, but they do not sleep. They dream. The poet and the pond one night. They say, a poet sat by a pond, candle glowing beside him, quill in hand. He wasn't famous. He wasn't known. But he wrote anyway, because something about the night asked him to. Maybe he was writing to a lover. Maybe to the stars. Or maybe he just liked the way ink moved across paper in candlelight. Behind him, frogs sang. A breeze moved the leaves. And somewhere, a rose bloomed quietly. The maze of green, there is a maze in Versailles. A labyrinth of hedges from above. It's perfect, neat, and beautiful. But inside, it becomes a world of its own. Children laugh there. Adults get lost, and they don't mind. Some say, if you walk without thinking. The garden decides where you'll end. Up. And sometimes, it leads you right back to where you started, only softer. Light in the petals as twilight deepens, floral sculptures begin to glow. Not from magic, but from lanterns placed with care. Roses become dragons, vines become unicorns. Tulips shape themselves into swans, and all of them shimmer as the sky turns from gold to lavender to blue. No music, no words, just petals and firelight, and you watching, breathing, drifting. The last light at the very end of the garden. In the royal grove, the light becomes gold. True gold, it touches everything. Leaves, statues, benches, sometimes. A harpist sits there, playing only for the trees. The notes float, they do not hurry. They do not build. They simply are. Like you. Right now, closing. Let go and restand now. The garden rests. The tools are put away. The footsteps are gone. The air is still, and you are safe. You have walked every path, smelled every rose, heard every note. There is nothing more you need to do. The peaceful Gardens of Versailles part. 3 seasons in stillness. The Gardens of Versailles did not stay the same every day. They changed. Slowly, softly. With the seasons not all at once, like a flash of wind or a sudden storm, but like a breath. like the slow turning of a page. Spring would arrive first in the smallest of ways. A bud curling open at the edge of a path. A single daffodil peeking above the soil. The gardeners knew the signs. They would smile to one another without words, because they understood that life had returned. And the garden had begun to stretch its limbs again. In spring, the air smelled sweet, not heavy, but light, as though the garden had just washed its face. Bees began to hum. The fountains gurgled a little louder, as if pleased to see the sun. The roses woke slowly, first the whites, then the pinks, then, finally, the deep reds, bold but never loud. It was the season of renewal. But even that renewal came in whispers, and in between the hedges, little rabbits appeared, their soft ears twitching at every sound, their noses dipping into fallen petals. They had no fear here. Only curiosity. Then came summer. It was not harsh, not angry. It was warm and wide and golden. The sun lingered longer in the sky, as though reluctant to leave. Shadows stretched, and the gravel paths glowed under its touch. People strolled with parasols. Gentlemen leaned against railings, watching the light dance on the water. The orangery was at its peak, the scent of citrus drifting through the air like a melody. And there were dragonflies, everywhere. Their wings caught the light, like shards of glass turned soft. Some days, the heat would rise just enough to make the air shimmer. And the only sound would be the gentle crackle of gravel beneath careful footsteps. No one hurried. Why would they? Everything was alive, but nothing was in a rush. Autumn came like a sigh. Soft winds, cooler mornings, leaves turning from green to fire and then to gold. The trees, once so proud and full, began to whisper of rest. The gardeners harvested what they had grown. They trimmed, cleaned, and gently prepared the beds for the long nap ahead. Noble guests wore richer fabrics, now velvet and wool, and they walked with their hands tucked behind their backs, breathing in the last perfume of fading roses. The statues seemed to change too. Their marble faces caught the golden light differently. Their expressions became thoughtful, not sad, just still. And then, winter, when the garden slept. The fountains stopped their song. The hedges held frost in their arms. The gravel paths turned quiet and pale. The orangery was sealed shut, its great doors closed to protect the precious trees inside. But the garden was not forgotten. The gardeners still came. Wrapped in thick coats and scarves, they brushed snow from the paths. They checked the roots. They watched the sky. They understood something others didn't, that the garden was alive. Even now, it breathed beneath the soil. It dreamed beneath the snow, and in its silence, it grew strong again. One might think the garden is only beautiful when it blooms. But Versailles was beautiful in every season, even in its stillness. It remained itself, calm, graceful, eternal, even in the quietest hour. There was something alive beneath the hush. And perhaps that is the lesson the garden teaches us beneath all the beauty and the history and the careful design, that stillness is not empty. Quiet is not nothing. Rest is not the absence of life. It is the preparation for something wonderful. And now, here you are, resting, still, at peace, just like the garden, just like the earth, just like the stars outside your window. The peaceful gardens of Versailles. For caretakers and gentle rituals among all the grandeur of Versailles, perhaps the most peaceful souls were not the nobles or the visitors, but the ones who cared for the garden every day. They weren't famous. Their names didn't appear in the great books of history, but they were there, quiet, steady, present. The gardeners, they arrived early in the morning before the sun had risen, while the paths were still cloaked in mist. Their boots were worn from years of walking. Their hands bore gentle signs of soil, not dirty, but honest. Each one had their own quiet ritual. One might begin by inspecting the rose beds, another by walking along the tree-lined alleys. One older man would always pause beside the same statue each day, giving it a soft nod as if greeting an old friend. They didn't speak much, not because they were unfriendly, but because the garden didn't ask for noise. It asked for presence. It asked for care. And the gardeners answered. They trimmed the hedges not just with shears, but with love. Each line had to be straight, each curve soft, each shape intentional dot. Sometimes they would kneel beside a sleeping bush, whispering softly to it as they pruned. Were they speaking to the plant? Perhaps. Or perhaps they were simply thinking aloud. And the garden was listening. The tools they used were simple: wooden handles, rusted iron, ropes made from old hemp. But in their hands, these things became instruments of calm. A rake moving through gravel made the softest sound, like a whisper being drawn across silk. A broom sweeping old leaves felt like a lullaby. And the watering cans, how gently they poured, never rushed, never splashing. Just a silver stream of water falling like a sigh. Among the gardeners, there was a quiet understanding. You did not rush the roses. You did not scold the soil. You waited. You watched. You gave time. That was the way of the garden. And over the years, it became the way of the people too. And then there were the caretakers, who didn't garden at all. The ones who lit the lanterns along the garden's edge as twilight came. One by one, a flicker, then a glow, until the whole walkway was bathed in golden light. Or the man who polished the stone benches each morning with a soft cloth, not for show, but because he said the marble liked to be touched kindly. Even the boys who fetched water from the deep cisterns did so with a strange kind of reverence, moving slowly, as though afraid to disturb the air. Everyone in the garden seemed to move more slowly than the world beyond. And perhaps that was the point. Versailles was not just a place to be seen, it was a place to feel, and the caretakers understood that. They didn't speak of beauty. They lived it in every trimmed hedge, in every swept path, in every silent morning spent listening to the leaves. Sometimes, when the work was done and the garden was quiet, few of the caretakers would gather under the old cedar near the orangery. They wouldn't talk much, just sit, maybe share a crust of bread or a piece of cheese from a cloth bundle, maybe sip from a tin cup of cool tea. And as the sun sank behind the palace walls, they would watch the light fall across the Grand Canal, and they would smile, because they knew something that the world beyond the garden had forgotten. That peace, true peace, lives in small moments, in slow work, in quiet hands, in shared silence. Let the peace of those moments linger with you now. As you settle deeper into your own quiet night, let your breath soften. Let your mind slow you. Two are in the garden, and here nothing needs to be done. Everything is already enough. The peaceful gardens of Versailles, 5 hidden groves and quiet corners. The main gardens of Versailles were grand and open, wide paths, towering fountains, neat rows of trees. But if you knew where to look, if you wandered slowly and listened closely, you would find the hidden groves, small secret spaces, tucked between tall hedges and marble walls, sheltered by vines, protected by silence. These were not the places tourists visited or kings held court. These were the quiet corners of the garden, where stillness lived. One such grove was known by the caretakers as La Repose des Ombres, the resting place of shadows. It was a shaded square with low shrubs, a soft patch of grass, and one lone bench made of worn stone. Sunlight filtered through, the leaves in thin golden lines, like threads being gently sewn through the air. Nobody spoke here. Even birds seemed to sing more softly. Those who sat there did not come to think, or plan, or speak. They came to breathe, to simply exist without effort. Another corner, known only to a few, had a small reflecting pool, just a circle of water, maybe 6 feet across, no statues, no flowers, only stillness. It was said that in this spot, time moved differently, that an hour there could feel like a dream, that worries dissolved into the water like morning mist. Visitors would often arrive with tired faces and leave with eyes that blinked slowly, like someone waking from a gentle sleep. There was also a path known by those who worked the gardens, a winding trail between high hedges with a soft dirt floor that never seemed to dry completely. They called it La Chemin. Day pass ledgers, the path of light footsteps. It was shaded almost entirely, even on the brightest day. And the sound of your own footfalls disappeared into the soft moss below. Walking there felt like floating, like drifting through the memory of a forest rather than walking through one. Even the breeze changed its sound. It whispered instead of live. Rustling, some caretakers said they had dreams of these hidden corners, even when they were far from the gardens. They would see the sunlight dancing on stone benches, hear the splash of distant fountains echoing down long hallways of hedges, feel the cool air brush their cheeks like a familiar hand. These weren't dreams of grandeur. They were dreams of peace, soft, weightless, warm. And then there were the garden nights. Most people never saw them. By dusk, the visitors would leave. The nobles would return to their chambers. The laughter would fade into the palace walls, but some stayed. The caretakers, the guards, few silent figures with lanterns and slow walks. At night, the gardens became something else entirely. The fountains would sleep, the trees would hush, and the stars. Oh, how the stars would gather above the treetops on clear evenings. A few caretakers would meet near the small amphitheater grove just to lie down and watch the sky. No ceremony, no planning, it's just blankets on the grass, eyes to the heavens, and breath slowed with wonder. Sometimes they would bring dried figs or slices of pear wrapped in cloth, and pass them hand to hand in the dark, without a word. They didn't point at constellations, they didn't name planets. They just watched. It was enough. And in that watching, they felt something timeless. Not loneliness, not even joy, just stillness. The kind that connects you to everything. You could lie there too, if you wish. Right now, just imagine the coolness of the grass beneath your body, the hum of crickets in the distance, the faraway murmur of water in the fountains, and the night sky, vast and endless, holding you gently beneath its stars. Let yourself stay in that quiet place a little longer. There's no need to rise, no need to think. You are safe here. You are part of the garden now, just as the trees are, just as the stars are, just as the silence is. The peaceful Gardens of Versailles Part 6. The orangery and the citrus rituals far below the palace's gaze. Nestled in the lower grounds near the south terrace, rested a hidden kingdom within the gardens. It was called the orangery, but it was more than a place for trees. It was a sanctuary, a silent cathedral of green dot. Here, the air always smelled faintly of citrus, orange blossoms, lemon rinds, a perfume that lingered even in winter. The orangery had been built like a palace in miniature. Massive stone walls kept the warmth in rows of tall arched windows, caught the sunlight like cupped hands. And inside, more than 1,000 orange and lemon trees slept in wooden crates. Each tree had a name. Not official names, not written ones, but the caretakers whispered them anyway. La Douce, La Petite Roi, Celestine. Some were centuries old. Some had come from Italy, Spain, or distant islands. Some had stories tied to royal hands and secret gifts. But to the gardeners, they were all just trees. Living things that required gentle care every single day. The ritual began early. Just before dawn, a few gardeners would gather by the low steps, wool coats wrapped tight against the morning chill. The doors of the orangery, tall and wooden, would creak open slowly, and the light from their lanterns would spill into the darkness like melted gold. Inside, citrus trees stood in long, perfect rows, not a single leaf out of place. Not a single crate. Crooked silence ruled the space. Only the soft scrape of boots on stone, the rustle of leaves shifting under breath, and the sound of water being poured from copper pitchers into dark, rich soil. The gardeners did not hurry. There was no rushing in the orangery. Each tree received the same care, a check of its roots, a brushing of its bark, a soft whisper or two, spoken without thought. Yes, the gardeners whispered to them, not commands, not instructions, just kindness. Bonjour, mon vieux. 2. As being dormi. There you are, old friend. It wasn't superstition, it was care. Like humming to a baby, or patting a dog on the head. And the trees responded. Not in words, of course, but in small signs. A blossom in winter, a brighter green in the leaves, a sweeter fragrance after rain, it was said. Among the staff that the trees knew when the king visited. That they stood a little straighter. That their fruit glowed more brightly in the light in summer. The ritual changed. The orangery opened its doors to the gardens. The trees were wheeled out one by one. The gardeners used old wooden carts, with brass wheels and soft linen to wrap the trunks. It took an entire morning, sometimes two, to move them all. But once outside, they lined the paths like quiet, gentle guards. Their leaves shimmered in the breeze. Their oranges glowed like tiny suns. And their scent drifted across the terraces, blending with rose and thyme and fresh-cut grass. It was a moving of peace, a ceremony of patience. The visitors rarely noticed. The trees themselves, they would smile at the colors, breathe in the sweet air, and continue their stroll. But they did not see the careful hours behind each one. They did not feel the soft love woven into every branch. Only the gardeners knew that story, and the trees. And perhaps, if you listen gently now, you can still hear the sound of wheels turning softly on gravel, the rustle of leaves being brushed by hand, a quiet voice saying, "Here you go, mon ami. This is your sun for the day. You may stay here, if you wish, among the oranges and the light. Breathe slowly. Let the scent of blossoms calm your thoughts. There is no reason to move, no reason to leave. The orangery is always here, quiet, steady, still." The Peaceful Gardens of Versailles Part 7, the Grand Canal and the water that dreamed beyond the tidy rows of parterres. Past the winding bosquets and the gentle rhythm of the fountains. There lay a quiet mirror stretched long across the land. It was the Grand Canal, a great ribbon of still water, reaching far beyond what the eye could easily follow. Some called it the lake, others called it the reflecting path. But to those who lived and worked near it, 'twas simply the water that dreamed. The canal was vast, nearly 2 kilometers long. And yet it felt intimate. Perhaps it was the quietness of it, the way it held the sky in its surface, turning clouds into shapes that drifted slowly with the breeze. Or perhaps it was the swans. They were always there, white and serene, floating in pairs or small families. They did not speak often, but when they did, their calls were deep and echoing, like bells struck in mist. Every morning before visitors arrived, a man in a dark green coat would walk the edge of the canal. He carried a simple wooden staff, carved with small vines along its side. His job was not to command the water. No one could. His task was to listen to it. He would pause at every bend, dip his hand into the cool surface, and close his eyes. Was the level too low? Had the swans been fed? Was there debris from last night's wind? He would listen. Then move on. Near the center of the canal was a small stone bench, cracked with age, softened by moss. Here, the waterman would often sit, not to rest, but to think. Behind him, the trees would whisper gently. Ahead of him, the swans would glide, unhurried. He might take a small pouch from his coat. Inside were crumbs of bread soaked in honey and herbs. It was for the oldest swan. They called her Maria Loon, white feathers streaked with silver, eyes darker than ink. She came only to him, moved slowly, never flapping. And when she arrived, he would speak to her softly in Old French. No one knew what he said, but those who walked nearby felt the peace in it, like prayer, like a song from a time. Before time, the water in the canal had to be managed carefully. It wasn't natural, not really. It was a marvel of engineering, designed to reflect the sky and charm the king. Hidden pumps deep within the forest brought water from streams miles away. They used the flow of wind, the turn of wheels, the pressure of gravity, all silent, all unseen, and every few days when the canal needed tending, a team of quiet workers would arrive at dawn. They wore soft boots so they wouldn't startle the birds, and they carried long poles wrapped in wool to gently clear away leaves, algae, or fallen petals. They moved like shadows, deliberate, calm, sometimes humming as they worked. They never spoke loudly. The canal would not allow it in the afternoons. Musicians would sometimes arrive, not in grand processions, but in pairs, a lute and a flute, a harp and a voice. They would play from one end of the water, letting the sound drift and echo. It was music meant not for applause, but for air-soft notes that hovered above the still surface, dancing with the breeze, disappearing into the trees, and sometimes, just sometimes, the king himself would walk by, not with fanfare, not with court, just himself and a single valet. Strolling along the curved paths beside the canal, he would pause now and then to watch the swans, or dip a finger into the water, or simply sit on the moss-covered bench once used by the gardener, the poet, and the old waterman. No one disturbed him there. Even kings need quiet, and so the Grand Canal slept and woke. Just like a living thing, it remembered footsteps, it echoed music, it whispered to the trees. And when evening came, and the sky turned gold behind the palace spires, the water turned still again, holding that light, that perfect light, just a little longer than anything else could. Now, let yourself rest by the water's edge. Feel the smooth stone beneath your palm. Hear the soft splash of a swan's wing. Smell the distant scent of cedar, lavender, and dusk. This canal was built for reflection of sky, of sound, of self. Stay here as long as you wish. The water dreams without end. The peaceful Gardens of Versailles Part 8. The labyrinth of fountains and secrets ducked away behind high hedges and quiet paths. Far from the wide gravel promenades and open lawns, there lay something curious, something whimsical, a place made not for spectacle, but for wonder. This was the labyrinth. It was no ordinary maze. It did not twist endlessly to confuse. It did not imprison. Instead, it invited you to wander slowly, to discover, to pause, to imagine. Its walls were tall, made of carefully clipped hornbeam and yew, dark green and thick. They kept out the noise of the palace, and held the quiet like a soft coat. Inside, paths turned gently, not sharply. They bent like rivers, offering gentle choices at each corner. A surprise, not a puzzle or a trick, but a story. You see, the labyrinth was filled with fountains, not grand cascades like Neptune's pool, nor towering jets like the Central Grove, but small, delicate fountains, each telling a tale from the fables of old. There was the fox and the grapes, a sly fox cast in lead, his nose turned upward, toward grapes just out of reach. Water trickled softly from the vine above, falling into a shallow basin shaped like a leaf. Then the tortoise and the hare mid-leap, frozen in time. The tortoise, still and calm. From under his shell, a gentle stream of water poured onto pebbles below. Each sculpture was alive with meaning, and each fountain sang a soft, musical whisper. Never loud, always gentle. Children of the court would walk the maze with small notebooks. They'd be guided by a nurse or tutor, tracing paths, solving gentle riddles. At each fountain, they'd sit and guess the tale. They would not rush. There was no prize. The journey was the treasure. Sometimes they'd lie on the mossy stone, benches nearby, eyes closed, listening to the tiny splashes of water, and they'd drift into daydreams of talking animals, wise owls, and golden coins dropped into enchanted wells. Even adults wandered the labyrinth, dukes, duchesses, diplomats. They came not to learn, but to remember quiet joys, simple wisdom, and the peaceful pleasure of walking without destination. Many believed the fountains whispered answers if you sat still long enough. Not answers to questions of war or politics, but to questions that lived deeper. Where does happiness hide? Why do we chase what runs away? How does silence feel when it is loved? And though the labyrinth was not large, it took hours to truly see, because no two visits were the same. The light shifted. The wind changed the song of the water, and sometimes you could swear the fox had moved just slightly. At the very center of the maze, there was a clearing. No fountain, no sculpture, just a ring of lavender bushes and a single marble bench. It was the only spot where the sky opened wide above. You could sit there in complete stillness, surrounded by green, with the sun on your face and the fragrance of lavender thick in the air. Those who sat there for long enough said time slowed, not stopped, just softened, like the last note of a lullaby. The gardeners loved the labyrinth most of all. They walked its paths at dawn, checking the fountains. They trimmed the hedges with careful hands, and they whispered greetings to the animals of lead and bronze, as if they were friends. Some believed that every sculpture had its own guardian spirit. One for the crow, another for the lion, a sleepy spirit in the turtle shell. Whether true or not, the idea brought comfort. And in a garden like Versailles, where every flower was placed with purpose, even myths had their place. As evening came, the labyrinth grew softer still. Lanterns lit the paths, one by one. The fountain's waters sparkled in flickers, and the statues cast long shadows on the mossy ground. Few walked it at night, but those who did never forgot. Because in that darkness, the maze became dreamlike, a place not of riddles, but of memory. Now imagine yourself there, just you and the path ahead. No rush, no sound but the water, the coolness of stone beneath, your fingers, the faint scent of lavender, and perhaps a whisper from the bronze rabbit telling you, stay a little longer. Sleep may come slowly, like the tortoise, but it always arrives. Let your thoughts wander through the labyrinth tonight. There is no way to be lost here. It's only places to pause, to rest, to dream. The peaceful gardens of Versailles part. The gardens fall asleep when the last lanterns flicker, and the breeze carries the final scent of roses across the still ponds. The gardens of Versailles begin to fall asleep. The fountains grow quiet. The gravel paths no longer echo footsteps. The statues stand motionless, as if dreaming their own quiet dreams. The trees, so carefully trimmed by day, now stretch toward the stars. Their leaves whisper soft lullabies in the dark. The moonlight pools gently over the Grand Canal, and swans tuck their heads beneath their wings. The gardeners have long since returned to their cottages. Even the birds are silent. Somewhere within the orangery, sweet citrus trees sleep under their glass roofs. Their scent still lingers in the night air. But even the lemons rest now in the grove of Apollo. The sun god no longer watches. 'Tis. Chariot of gold is quiet, and his face glows only faintly in the moon's silver reflection. Everything waits, not for anything grand, but for morning. For dew, for light, and you, dear listener. You too can rest now. There are no more paths to follow. No more fountains to admire. The stories have been told. The statues have spoken. The leaves have shared their secrets. Now it's time to close your eyes. Let the soft air of Versailles wrap around you like a gentle blanket. Breathe slowly, as if your breath moves with the wind through the trees. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Only stillness. Only peace. Sleep deeply tonight, as if you're lying on the sun-warmed bench at the center of the maze. The lavender blooming. Beside you, the world quiet. The stars above, and perhaps, in your dreams, you'll wander those peaceful gardens again, soft step by soft step. Until morning comes, good night, and thank you for visiting the gardens.